She let the bank take it, my mother said into the microphone. And 63 people at the St. Luke's Church fundraiser dinner turned to look at me. That was a lie. My 2021 Toyota RAV4 had been paid off for 14 months, and by the end of that week I learned my parents had filed for a duplicate title, forged my name, and signed my car over to a junkyard on the south side of Columbus for $41,300 in insured value. Then a woman I had never met walked into a room on East Broad Street and read one sentence out loud, and my mother's lawyer closed his folder. My name is Holly Mercer. I am 24 years old. Now let me take you back to St. Luke's Fellowship Hall in Dublin, Ohio, on Saturday, September 16th, 2023. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. The fundraiser was for the church roof. That old slate roof had been leaking over Classroom 3 since spring, and everybody knew it because the building always smelled faintly like wet plaster and burnt coffee. My father, Stephen Mercer, was on the finance committee, so my parents were at the front of the room near the silent auction baskets and the trifold board with the donation thermometer colored in red marker. I was there because my grandmother, June Mercer, asked me to come. She had bought 2 tickets at $85 each and told me over the phone 3 days earlier, "Wear something that makes you look employed." That was her way of saying she was worried my parents had been talking about me again. I had on a navy blouse, black slacks, and flats that pinched my left heel. My hair was down because if I wore it up, my mother would say I looked severe. Even then, part of me still edited myself before I walked into a room she might be in. That is what growing up with her did. Not the dramatic kind of fear, the administrative kind. The kind that made you pre-correct your own face. My mother, Diane Mercer, had always known how to humiliate someone in a way that sounded helpful. She did not shout, she performed concern. She put one hand over the other at her waist, tilted her head, and spoke in complete sentences like she was dictating to a receptionist. That night, the microphone squealed once. Everyone laughed, and Pastor Evan Cole thanked people for donating a little over $28,000 so far. Then he invited members of the finance committee to say a few words. My father did the usual: gratitude, stewardship, generosity, all that language men use when they want the room to think they are decent. My mother was not even on the committee, but she stepped up anyway when the microphone was passed down the line. She smiled at the tables, beige lipstick, pearl earrings, her church face. Then she said, "And some of us know what happens when young people do not learn discipline. They buy things they cannot keep, and then they make the family carry the shame. Holly let the bank take her car, and now she is telling stories because she does not want to admit she failed." The room went quiet. I counted because that is what I do when I need to stay upright. 6 seconds, maybe 7. My grandmother said, "Diane," very softly. Not enough to stop anything. My cousin Lila put down her water glass. I remember the sound of the ice hitting the side. 2 women from the quilting ministry turned all the way around to look at me. Pastor Cole's wife, Meredith, actually took one step toward the microphone and then stopped because my father gave her that small, flat look he used when he wanted everyone to stay in their lane. I stood up. Not quickly, I did not cry. I did not defend myself into a microphone. I just said, "My car is paid off." My mother looked at me with that almost pitying expression she used when she wanted witnesses. "Holly, this is not the place." It was exactly the place. She had made sure of that. I left before dessert, through the side hall by the children's wing, past the little table with the plastic pumpkins and the cinnamon candles, out to the parking lot where the evening air smelled like cut grass and exhaust. My RAV4 was where I had parked it, under the lot light, still dusty from driving out to Hilliard for work that week. I sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel and looked at the paid-off title copy in my glove compartment. I had kept a copy because my father taught me years ago that cars were paperwork on wheels. It is still strange to me that he taught me exactly what he would later try to use against me. I drove home to my apartment on Bethel Road, fed my cat, and told myself to let the church thing go. That was Saturday night. Monday morning at 8:17, I walked out to go to work, coffee in one hand, tote bag in the other, and the parking spot was empty. Not empty in a vague way. Empty in that sharp, wrong way where your body understands it before your thoughts do. There was a rectangle of darker pavement where the tires had been. A broken zip tie, a greasy black streak near the curb. I stood there in my scrub top and said out loud, "No. I work front desk at a physical therapy clinic on Henderson Road. Not glamorous, stable." My schedule started at 8:30, and I was supposed to open with Carla Jensen, the office manager. Instead, I called the towing companies first: Shamrock, Buckeye, Capital, no record. Then the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher asked for the VIN, and I read it off the insurance card in my phone. She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice had changed. "Ma'am, that vehicle was transferred for salvage on Saturday afternoon." I said, "What does that mean?" "It means, according to the record, ownership changed and the vehicle was released to Metro Auto Salvage at 2:38 p.m. You may need to contact the BMV Title Support Center." I leaned against the brick wall outside my building because my legs had gone watery. Transferred by who? I don't have that in front of me. I stared at the parking spot and smelled cold coffee and rain from the night before. Saturday at 2:38, I had been at work until 4 that day. My car had been in that parking lot until at least 6:20 because I drove it to the church fundraiser. So either the system was wrong or someone had filed paperwork saying they owned my car before they physically took it. I called my father first, straight to voicemail. I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring. "What now, Holly?" "My car is gone." Silence for half a beat. Then, "If this is about the repo, I told you that public embarrassment often follows private irresponsibility." I remember moving the phone away from my face and looking at it. Not because I was shocked, because it was suddenly too clean, too ready. "It was not repossessed," I said. "Then I am sure there is some explanation. Did you touch my title?" Another pause. Longer this time, then, in the same calm voice, "You have been spiraling for months, and I will not participate in your accusations." I hung up. I called in late to work and drove a rental from the little enterprise desk inside the collision center on Kenny Road by 10:30. The man there gave me a gray Nissan Sentra that smelled like cherry air freshener and old cigarettes. I sat in that parking lot and opened a notes app page titled Monday. Then I wrote down every call, every time, every exact sentence I could remember. My mother's quote at church. The dispatcher's wording. The pause before she answered me. I did not scream. I did not drive to their house. Instead, I started a folder. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change, not because you're emotional, but because the paperwork has started moving without you, then you know this feeling. It is very quiet at first, then the ground gives way all at once. Stay with me, because the first document I pulled that afternoon told me my parents had planned this before my mother ever picked up that microphone. And if you're the kind of person who documents when people count on your silence, subscribe now. These are the stories where the details matter. By 1:15 on that same Monday, I was parked outside the deputy registrar office on Morse Road. The building smelled like toner, rubber mats, and the lemon cleaner they use on government counters. I took a number, B142. I was called at 1:49 by a woman with silver braids and pink reading glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. Her name tag said Rita Velasquez. I explained that my paid-off car had vanished and dispatch told me the title had been transferred for salvage. I expected her to tell me I needed a form. Instead, she frowned at her screen and said, "You're Holly Ann Mercer? Date of birth May 26, 1999? "Yes," she looked again. "A duplicate title was issued Friday, September 15th at 4:10 p.m. My skin went cold. "What?" She turned the monitor slightly, not enough for me to read all of it, but enough to see the entry. Duplicate title issued. Customer in person. Supporting ID verified. "No," I said. "I was at work Friday at 4:10. She looked at me then, really looked. "Do you have your driver's license with you?" I handed it over. She compared it, looked back at the screen, and something in her expression changed from routine to careful. "Can you wait right here a second?" She disappeared through a gray door behind the counter. I stood there listening to the buzz of fluorescent lights and somebody's toddler whining near the photo station. It took maybe 3 minutes. It felt like 20. She came back with a man in a Navy County polo who introduced himself as Martin Hale from Title Support. He had the tired face of someone who spends his life around other people's mistakes. He said, "Miss Mercer, Do you currently have possession of your vehicle title? I have a copy in my glove compartment. The original was in a file box in my apartment. When did you last see the original? Early August. Was anyone in your apartment with access to your paperwork? I answered without thinking. My parents watered my plants when I was in Cleveland for a weekend in August. The sentence hung there. He said, "We can print the duplicate title application. You may want to review the signature," he said. Review, not compare, not challenge. Review. He was being careful too. The signature on the duplicate title request was supposed to be mine. It was not. It was close enough that a rushed clerk might let it through. My first name was right. My last name had the old version of my M that I stopped using in 10th grade because a teacher said it looked like two humps in a tail. Whoever forged it had learned me years ago and not recently. My address was correct. My VIN was correct. My mother's church penmanship was all over the capital letters. The application listed a temporary mailing address on Dunsmore Road, my parents' street. I said, "Can I get a copy of this?" Martin Hale nodded. Yes. Then he added in the practiced voice of someone not trying to say too much. "If this was not you, there is a process for marking the title invalid while the transfer is reviewed. You should also pull the salvage transfer record. Can I do that here? You can request it here." He slid me the form and a black pen attached to the counter with a bead chain. My hand was shaking just enough to make the first H in Holly look wrong. By 3:30 that afternoon, I had 4 pages in my folder and a rental car I could not really afford for more than a few days. By 5 o'clock, Carla at the clinic had rearranged the schedule so I could work the phones from the front desk between patients. She brought me a granola bar and said, "Your face looks like drywall." I laughed once. Then I told her the short version. Carla is one of those women who has no softness in her voice but a terrifying amount of loyalty once she decides you are worth it. 51 years old, divorced twice, keeps extra phone chargers in a labeled drawer. When I showed her the duplicate title application after our last patient left, she put on her readers, read it through, and said, "That is your mother's handwriting on the address line, isn't it?" Yes. Okay. Do not call them again. From now on, email when possible. Text if you need short answers. And get everything off your apartment cloud account if they ever touched your laptop. I nodded, she said. "You need a lawyer friend." "I don't have one." She thought for a second. "I know a woman whose daughter dates one. That is how I met Priya Nandakumar 2 days later, on Wednesday, September 20th, at a coffee shop in Upper Arlington that smelled like espresso and cardamom. Priya was 29, sharp, kind, and not dramatic. She listened without interrupting while I handed her the duplicate title application, my insurance declarations page showing the cash value at 41,300, screenshots proving I was clocked in at work when the duplicate title was issued, and a photo from the church fundraiser at 7:11 p.m. with my RAV4 visible through the fellowship hall window behind the raffle table. When I finished, she tapped the photo. "This matters because the car was still with me after they got the duplicate title?" Exactly, which means the duplicate title did not follow a legitimate repossession or surrender. It set up a later theft and transfer. "I am not trying to take them to court." She nodded. "I know right now you need records, not speeches. Get the junkyard intake sheet. Get any gate footage. Find out who physically delivered the vehicle. And do not threaten them. People get chatty when they think they are safe." That line stayed with me. People get chatty when they think they are safe. I emailed my parents that night at 9:12 p.m. Subject line, "Vehicle documentation," I wrote. "I am requesting any documents you have relating to my Toyota RAV4 VIN ending 3871. Please send copies by Friday at noon. If you have no documents, reply confirming that." My mother wrote back 13 minutes later. "Holly, this fixation is unhealthy. We have attempted to help you navigate several adult setbacks. We will not validate delusions. I encourage you to rest." My father did not reply. That same night, my cousin Leela texted me a screenshot from the St. Luke's Women's Bible Study group chat. My mother had written, "Please pray for Holly. She is struggling with reality-based decision-making and has become accusatory." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not the betrayal itself, the scheduling of it. She had already framed my credibility before I could open my mouth. That is how long it took them to erase me. 48 hours. Now let me take you back to Thursday, September 21st. at 11:20 in the morning to Metro Auto Salvage on Performance Way, south of Columbus, where the office smelled like transmission fluid, hot metal, and stale onion rings. If you have never walked into a salvage yard office asking for proof your own parents destroyed your car, I hope you never do. It feels humiliating in a very specific way. Not because you're guilty, because every person behind that counter has seen chaos before, and you're standing there trying to explain a version of it that sounds too neat to be true. The woman at the front desk was named Denise. She had acrylic nails the color of peach candy and a fan pointed at her from under the desk. I gave her my VIN and asked for the intake record. She said they could not release owner records without proof of ownership. I handed over the title copy from my glove compartment, my license, and the duplicate title application showing the forged signature. She called someone in back. A man named Greg Hummel came out wiping his hands on a blue shop rag. He looked at the papers, looked at me, then said, "Who told you the vehicle came here? The county dispatch record and BMV transfer record." He exhaled through his nose. "All right." He disappeared into an office behind the counter. Denise turned the fan slightly toward me without saying anything. I stood there listening to a forklift beep in reverse somewhere behind the corrugated wall. Greg came back with 3 pages stapled together. The intake record listed my vehicle as owner surrendered on Sunday, September 17th, at 8:14 a.m. delivered by private tow, condition light front bumper scrape, no major damage, keys provided, seller signature Holly Mercer, again not mine. The payout line was the part that made me laugh, just one dry sound because it was so obscene. $700, not $41,300, not anything close to what the car was worth. They had transferred a vehicle with insured value of $41,300 and taken $700 from a junkyard because they needed it gone fast. They were not trying to profit, they were trying to erase. I asked Greg, who brought it in? He looked at the page, private tow under Mercer Family Hauling Authorization. That is not a company. I know. Do you have camera footage? His face tightened a little. Maybe. We overwrite after 30 days. What about this Sunday? He looked at me for another beat, then said, "Let me check." While he was gone, Denise lowered her voice and said, "Older white woman with a scarf, older guy with bifocals. They were in here arguing about whether the seats were leather." I looked at her. "You remember them? You remember weird things at this job?" I said. "Did they say they were my parents?" She shrugged. She said, "My daughter never finishes what she starts, loud enough for everybody." Of course she did. Greg returned and said there was gate camera footage and a copy could be preserved if requested. He gave me the email for their office manager and said, carefully, "You should request that today." I sat in my rental in their gravel lot and sent the email before I started the engine. Then I forwarded it to Priya. Then I made a new folder on my desktop called Car and added subfolders by date. That afternoon at 4:52, my father finally texted me. "You are embarrassing the family with these calls," I replied. "Did you file for a duplicate title on my car?" He answered 8 minutes later. "I will not discuss private family matters over text." I took a screenshot, timestamp visible. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in Worthington and parked across the street. I had not planned to, I just found myself there. Their porch light was on. The mums by the steps were the burnt orange kind. My mother bought every September. Through the front window, I could see my father in his recliner, and my mother carrying a laundry basket down the hall like it was an ordinary Thursday. I did not go in. Instead, I called my grandmother. June answered on the second ring. "Did you eat?" "No." "Start there." So I drove to her condo on Fishinger Road and ate tomato soup and a grilled cheese cut into neat rectangles because she still treated me, at 24, like stress-canceled out adulthood. Her condo smelled like cedar chests and the rose hand cream she had used since I was a child. When I told her everything, she closed her eyes. Then she said, "Your father came by on Friday afternoon." I stopped chewing. "Why?" "He said he needed to borrow your old birth certificate copy for some church file confusion." I told him it was in the hall cabinet if he needed to compare signatures on a volunteer waiver. I did not think that was the person who knew something and stayed silent. Not because she was cruel, because she was trained to assume my father had a decent reason. I reached for her hand and said, "Grandma, it is not your fault." She looked at me then and said the truest thing anybody said in those weeks. "I know, but it was still my key that opened the drawer." I drove home with that in my chest. On Friday, September 22nd, at 9:10 in the morning, the office manager from Metro Auto Salvage emailed me. Her name was Vanessa Cho. Attached were still images from the gate camera. Not video yet, just frame grabs. In the first image, my RAV4 is on a flatbed. In the second, my father is stepping down from the passenger side of his silver 2018 Ford F-150. His Ohio plate is visible. So is the scratch near the rear wheel well from when he backed into a post at Costco in March. In the third, my mother is standing at the service window in a pale blue scarf, signing something. I printed those images at the clinic because I did not trust myself to only have them digitally. Carla watched the pages come out of the printer and said, "There they are." I said yes. Then she said, "Now you make them say it." That afternoon, I went back to the BMV support office and asked for the scanned identification used at the duplicate title appointment. Martin Hale told me they could not release everything immediately, but he could note the discrepancy and escalate a review. Then, in a lower voice, he said, "The clerk who handled the transaction is here today. She may remember the customer." A minute later, Rita Velasquez stepped out from behind the counter again. She looked at the gate stills, especially the one with my mother in the blue scarf, and her eyes narrowed. "I remember her," Rita said. "She told me she had a daughter in a mental health crisis and needed to replace a title quickly because the daughter was not functioning." I felt my face go hot and then cold. Rita kept going. "She had an ID. It looked right at first, but the laminate edge was lifting on one corner. I almost sent her away." Then the older man said they were already late for a tow appointment. "Martin said, Rita." She glanced at him, then back to me. "I am telling you what I remember." That sentence turned the whole thing from a suspicion into a path. Not proof yet. A path. If you have ever been painted unstable by the very people who are making you unstable, then you know how important it is when one outside person simply says, "I remember." That is sometimes the first crack in the wall, and the next thing Rita remembered is the detail that ended my mother's version of events for good. 3 days later, on Monday, September 25th, at 6:40 p.m., I was sorting insurance documents at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown Franklin County number. It was Martin Hale. He said, "Miss Mercer, I cannot discuss all internal review steps, but I can tell you the duplicate title request included a photocopied ID that did not match BMV image records in several small ways. You may want to come in tomorrow morning." I said, "Am I allowed to ask what ways?" He paused. "The most obvious was the height listed. 5'6". Your record says 5'3". My mother is 5'6". I closed my eyes. She had not just forged me, she had accidentally described herself. I barely slept that night. The refrigerator hummed too loud. Every car passing on Bethel Road sounded like trouble. At 1:13 a.m., my mother emailed me again. "We have become concerned by your harassment of county staff and private businesses. If this continues, we will have to protect ourselves." I read it twice, then sent it to Priya. She called immediately. "Good, she is nervous. She sounds threatening. She is, but she is also creating a record. Let her." The next morning, Tuesday, September 26th, I was at the BMV office at 8:28 when they opened. Martin handed me a reviewed copy of the duplicate title packet. The ID copy was grainy but visible enough. Same name, my name. A photo that looked like an older, blurred version of my driver's license image. The height said 5'6". The signature on the line below was the same fake one from the application. Then Martin did something careful and decent. He said, "I cannot say more than this in an open lobby, but the transaction has been flagged as fraudulent, and the title transfer is being held for investigation. You should notify your insurer that the ownership change is disputed." I asked, "Can I get that in writing?" He nodded once. "You can get a transaction review notice." That notice mattered. Insurance companies love paper and hate human emotion. By noon, I had opened a claim, uploaded the review notice, the church fundraiser photo, the junkyard intake sheet, the gate stills, and my work time card. My adjuster, a man named Leon Barrett in Cincinnati, sounded skeptical at first, then less skeptical, then interested. By Thursday, he called back and said, "Miss Mercer, your file is unusual." "That is one word for it." He gave a quick laugh, then stopped. "Your policy value for the RAV4 is $41,300. We are reviewing whether this qualifies as theft by fraudulent transfer. If so, payout can proceed while recovery rights are pursued against the parties involved. I wrote every word down in my notebook. Friday morning, September 29th, my clinic manager got a call, not from insurance, from my father. Carla took it at the front desk while I was checking in a patient named Mrs. Alberts. She listened for maybe 20 seconds, then said, "Sir, if you call this workplace again to discuss my employee's mental state, I will document it as harassment." She hung up and looked at me. "Your dad says you're having delusions about your car and should not be handling money or patient information." For 1 second, I thought I might throw up. Then Carla slid a yellow legal pad toward me and said, "Write down the time, his exact name if he gave it. Start now." I did. He was escalating because the documents were closing in. That afternoon, I got a voicemail from Pastor Evan Cole asking if we could clear up some confusion before Sunday services. My mother had apparently told him I was spreading false accusations against my father and trying to drag the church into a private family misunderstanding. I told him I would meet if the church administrator was present. Not because I trusted him, because I wanted another witness in the room. Sunday, October 1st at 1:15 p.m., I sat in Pastor Cole's office with its fake ficus tree, framed mission statement, and peppermint smell from the bowl on his desk. Meredith Cole, the church administrator, sat beside him with a legal pad. My parents were already there. My mother wore cream. My father wore his finance committee blazer. They looked composed. They looked ready. Pastor Cole folded his hands and said, "We are here because the fundraiser comments created distress, and there are now concerns on all sides." My mother gave a sad little smile. "We are simply worried about Holly. She has become attached to an untrue story about the vehicle," I said. "I brought documents." My father spoke for the first time. "A distressed person can also collect papers." That line was for the room, not for me. I slid copies across the coffee table, one stack at a time. Duplicate title application, fake signature, height discrepancy, church fundraiser photo at 7:11 p.m. with the car visible after the duplicate title was issued, junkyard intake sheet, gate stills with my father and his truck, Carla's written note about my father's call to my workplace. Pastor Cole started with the church photo. Meredith leaned in. My mother did not touch the papers at all. Then she said, "Very evenly, anyone can manipulate a narrative with selective records." I looked at her and said, "Then we can wait for the county." That landed. Because by then I already knew the county review meeting was set for Wednesday, October 4th at 10 a.m. on East Broad Street, in a little administrative room where disputed title transactions were sometimes explained before next steps were taken. Martin Hale had called and told me I could attend because the title was in my name. He also said other involved parties had been notified. My parents had their own lawyer by then. Randall Keene, 60-something, silver tie office in Worthington Hills. He emailed me once to say his clients denied wrongdoing and would attend any review to avoid further reputational harm. That phrase made me smile when I read it. Not because it was funny, because he already understood there would be harm. Now let me take you back to Wednesday, October 4th at 9:53 in the morning, to the Franklin County Title Review Office on East Broad Street. The waiting room carpet had that old industrial pattern in rust and blue, the kind that hides stains. There was a water cooler in the corner and a machine humming behind a locked half door. I remember all of that because my body was looking for ordinary things to hold on to. Priya came with me even though she kept reminding me she was not my lawyer, and this was not some dramatic courtroom scene. She wore a charcoal blazer and carried a yellow folder so overstuffed it would not close. My grandmother came too, in a navy cardigan, with her purse clutched to her chest. She said she needed to be there because some keys should be returned in person. My parents arrived at 9:58 with Randall Keene. My mother had on that same pale blue scarf from the junkyard gate image. I do not know if she forgot or if she believed details had stopped mattering. She looked at me once and said, "You have made this ugly." I said, "No, I kept copies." We were called in at 10:02 by a woman named Celeste Harmon from Title Compliance. Mid-40s, calm, low voice. She had the kind of face that did not invite performance. Inside the room, there was a rectangular table, 6 chairs, a speakerphone, a wall clock that clicked too loudly, and the smell of paper dust and copier heat. Celeste started by stating the transaction number, the vehicle VIN, and the date of the duplicate title issuance. Then she said they had concerns about identity verification, signature consistency, and the timeline between duplicate issuance and salvage transfer. She spoke like someone reading weather damage. My father tried first. This is a family misunderstanding involving a vulnerable young woman. Celeste held up one finger without looking at him. I will ask for statements when I need them. Silence. Then she walked through the packet. My original title record, the duplicate title request, the scanned identification used at the counter, the transfer to salvage, the review flag. At 10:11, she asked if the processing clerk was available. Martin stepped out and came back with Rita Velasquez. Rita took a seat near the door and folded her hands in her lap. She looked at the packet, then at my mother, then back at Celeste. Celeste asked, "Do you recall this transaction on September 15th?" Rita said, "Yes." "Why do you recall it?" "Because the woman presenting as Holly Mercer said her daughter was having a mental health episode and she needed to replace a title quickly. She also presented identification with a lifting laminate edge. I noted that mentally because it looked worn in an unusual way." My mother's jaw moved once. "That was all." Celeste asked, "Do you see that person in this room?" Rita did not hesitate. She pointed at my mother. "The woman in the blue scarf." The room went quiet, not dramatic, just flat, final. My father said, "That is not what happened." Celeste turned one page. "Mr. Mercer, I have not asked you a question." Then she pressed the button on the speakerphone and said, "Can you patch in Metro Auto Salvage Office Manager Vanessa Cho?" A click, then a woman's voice filled the room. "Vanessa here." Celeste confirmed the VIN and date, then asked who delivered the vehicle on September 17th. Vanessa said, "We preserved gate video and intake records. The vehicle arrived by private tow at 8:14 a.m. The people who completed intake were Stephen Mercer and Diane Mercer. We also have staff notation that they represented themselves as handling the disposal on behalf of their daughter." My mother looked down at her folded hands. My father said the car was abandoned to us. Priya wrote something in her folder without looking up. Celeste asked Vanessa one more question. "Did the seller's signature match the ID presented?" Vanessa said, "We only photocopied the duplicate title, not the ID, but I can say the woman signing did not appear to be the woman listed on the insurance card later provided by Miss Mercer." Then came the part I did not know about. Celeste said, "Thank you. One more person is joining us." The door opened, and a woman I had never met walked in carrying a slim gray file. She introduced herself as Tasha Boyd from the Ohio BMV Image Audit Unit. That was the outsider. Not Rita, though Rita mattered. Not Vanessa, though she mattered too. Tasha Boyd, mid-30s, gold hoop earrings, black flats, no expression at all. She sat down, opened the file, and said, "I reviewed the identification copy used in the duplicate title transaction against the existing driver record image for Holly Ann Mercer." Then she read one sentence aloud. "The image used at the counter is a reprinted scan of a prior license with altered height and laminate edge damage, and it does not match the current card or issuance pattern tied to Holly Mercer's record." Randall Keene closed his folder, actually closed it. "Slow, deliberate. Both hands," Tasha continued. "For the record, the height on the presented identification was 5'6". The licensed owner is recorded at 5'3". The fraudulent transaction also used a mailing address not associated with the driver's current file." My grandmother made one sound beside me, not crying, just breath leaving. My mother finally spoke. "This has been misinterpreted." That was it. One broken sentence. Celeste did not answer her. She turned to the final page and said, "Based on clerk identification, image audit, timeline inconsistency, and salvage yard confirmation, the duplicate title is invalidated as fraud. The transfer is void. Record correction will proceed today." I had been keeping that folder for 19 days. Then Celeste asked if the insurer had been notified. I said yes and gave her Leon Barrett's direct line. She wrote it down. Randall Keene put his hand flat on the table like he was studying himself. My father tried once more. There were family understandings in place regarding the use of the vehicle. Celeste looked at him for the first time. "Did you have written authorization from the titled owner?" He did not answer. That silence was the closest thing to truth I had ever gotten from him. After the meeting ended, we stood in the hallway while paperwork printed somewhere behind a door. The hallway smelled like dust and old heat. My mother walked past me on her way to the elevator and said, very quietly, "You could have handled this privately." I said, "You sold my car for $700. She did not answer. My grandmother touched my elbow and whispered, "Do not go after the wound, go after the invoice." That is one of the best sentences anyone has ever given me, and the invoice came fast. Now let me take you back to the next Thursday, October 12th at 4:30 in the afternoon, when the insurance payout posted to my account while I was sitting in my rental outside Trader Joe's eating crackers because I had forgotten lunch. $41,300. I did not feel triumphant. I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in 3 weeks. The rental charges stopped bleeding me. The replacement car search could start. The practical parts of my life resumed. But the price my parents paid was not just the money. Once the title transfer was voided, Leon Barrett's fraud unit pursued recovery against the parties who initiated the fraudulent disposal. That is insurance language for this. They came for them, not with a speech, with bills, statements, and a demand letter itemizing the payout, the tow, the rental reimbursement, and the administrative review costs. The total was $44,982. Then Metro Auto Salvage charged back the improper intake and turned over their preserved video when requested by the insurer's fraud team. And because my father's truck plate was clear in the gate footage, and because my mother's false ID packet had already been flagged, the whole thing stopped being a family misunderstanding and became what it had been all along. A documented fraud with names attached. St. Luke's did what churches do when paperwork becomes impossible to spiritualize. They moved slowly for 1 week, then very quickly all at once. On Sunday, October 15th, after second service, the Finance Committee met in the small conference room behind the kitchen. Meredith Cole was there. Pastor Cole was there. So was the church board treasurer, Anita Feldman, who does not tolerate mess in any form. I was not supposed to be there, and I did not ask to be. But my grandmother called me at 1:26 and said, "Come now, bring the folder." When I arrived, there were 11 people in the room and 2 folding chairs left against the wall. The room smelled like dishwasher steam and lemon bars from the fellowship table outside. My father was seated at the end of the table with both hands clasped. My mother sat beside him. She looked pale in a way I had never seen before. Not guilty, deprived of narrative control. Anita Feldman asked me only one thing. "Do you have the county review notice?" I handed it to her. She read the key lines out loud. Duplicate title invalidated as fraud. Transfer void. Identity mismatch confirmed by image audit. Salvage intake corroborated. Then Anita looked at my father and said, "Stephen, did you use church standing to lend credibility to statements made about your daughter in this vehicle?" He said, "I may have spoken too broadly in a personal matter." That was his apology. A passive construction in a folding chair. Pastor Cole asked him to resign from the Finance Committee effective immediately. Not later, not after prayer. Immediately, Meredith then informed my mother that she was being removed from event volunteer access pending board review because she had used church spaces and church communications to spread knowingly false information about me. Her meal ministry key fob had to be turned in before they left the building. It was a small plastic thing on a ring with a faded blue tag. She held it for a second too long, then she put it on the table. Some people lose money and recover. Some people lose status and never do. My mother valued being needed in that building more than almost anything. The kitchen access, the holiday decorating team, the fact that everyone knew she could open side doors and find forms. Losing that in front of people who had once deferred to her was a real punishment, specific, visible. My father lost more than the committee seat. The insurance recovery demand hit him and my mother jointly, and by November they had taken a loan against their home equity line to begin paying it. My aunt told my grandmother the first installment was $9,000 due within 30 days, with the rest on a signed repayment schedule. My father also lost his consulting contract with a small nonprofit in Westerville after the insurer contacted him there for updated employment verification, and somebody asked the wrong question at exactly the wrong time. He had built his entire adult life on sounding trustworthy, that ended on letterhead. If you have ever waited for truth to land in a room where people were very comfortable ignoring you, then you know this part matters. Not the shouting, not the fantasy, the inventory, what they lost, what it cost. The thing my parents never expected was that once outside people had to write their names down, the story stopped belonging to them. I bought my replacement car on Saturday, November 4th, from a dealership in Grove City, a 2022 RAV4 XLE in Silver Sky Metallic, 27,000 miles, certified used. I still checked every page before I signed. I still photographed the odometer and the plate before I drove off. That is the thing about winning after this kind of betrayal. You still win like someone who has been robbed by family. Carefully, my mother sent me one last email on Thanksgiving morning at 7:46 a.m. It did not have to become public. We acted under pressure and in good faith regarding property that had become a source of instability. There were misunderstandings on all sides. If you wish to discuss a path toward healing, that remains possible. I read it while the Macy's parade was on mute in the background and cinnamon rolls were in my grandmother's oven. Then I forwarded it to the folder and did not reply. I did not forgive her because she used the right nouns. I did not forgive my father because his silence finally looked tired. Instead, I bought a fireproof document box, changed every account password I had, updated every emergency contact, and asked my apartment complex to put a note on my file that no family member was to receive keys for any reason. On Christmas Eve, my grandmother gave me back the spare key to her hall cabinet. She placed it in my palm and said, "Not because I expect you to trust me less, because I expect you to trust yourself more." I keep that key on a separate ring from my car key. My parents are still married. They still live in the same house on Dunsmore Road. We speak twice a year, maybe, briefly, birthdays sometimes. Logistics only. My mother still signs her emails with warmth she has not earned. My father still avoids direct verbs when he talks about the fall of 2023. He says things like, "It was a difficult season," as if weather did it. But this is the part I want to leave you with. People love to say money changes people. I think paperwork does. Money creates temptation. Paperwork reveals character. My parents were willing to forge me, dispose of something I worked years to pay off, call my job, prime my church against me, and then use the word concern like it washed any of that clean. It did not. The duplicate title was voided. The transfer was erased. I got the full $41,300 back. They owed $44,982 to the insurer and related costs. My father lost his finance committee seat and his nonprofit contract. My mother lost her volunteer access, her church standing, and the easy authority she had built for 20 years in rooms where people used to trust her first. And me. I learned that calm is not the same thing as soft. I learned that documentation is a form of self-respect. I learned that when someone tries to make you look irrational, the most devastating thing you can do is become exact. I still park where cameras can see my car. I still keep copies of titles in two places. I still feel a small pulse of adrenaline if an unknown Franklin County number calls my phone. Winning did not give me my parents back. It just made it impossible for them to keep telling the story their way. And for now,